Jeremy, I just put it to record to the cloud. Is that all right?
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, we're recording. So, my name is Jean Marie Mansfield. I'm the Associate Director of Education at the Long Island Children's Museum. So I just wanted to welcome everybody for joining us, both in person and virtually. We are lucky enough to be at Ma's house, which is exciting. So for those that are not here, Jeremy Dennis has been gracious enough to open up his space to allow us to meet in person here. And so we thank you, Jeremy. And we are excited to be here. And so we're going to get started. And tonight, again, I'm going to introduce and let them introduce themselves to Denise Silva-Dennis and Allison McGovern. And we're going to be digging a little deeper into the topic of land acknowledgement. We've recorded all of the questions that you provided in the RSVP link. And a lot of the questions that we're going to talk about tonight, we'll do kind of a quick overview of some of the info that we talked about last week, because we did see some, or not last week, but in October, we did see some of the same questions about what we spoke about before come up again. So just so everybody's on the same page. And then we'll dive deeper into some of the questions that kind of take the conversation a little further. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Denise. And if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody who's here. It's so nice to do a hybrid.
I might say before you start.
Oh, yeah.
We can mute the microphone on that one.
Oh.
We'll unmute this one.
Yes.
There you go.
Let's try it again. Hello, everybody who's here in person and everybody virtually. Denise Silva-Dennis, and I just wanted to welcome you all here at my former residence, which is now Jeremy and Rihanna's residence and art space. Thank you for being here, Jean Marie and Allison, for the discussion. And I'm from Shinnecock. I was born here, and I also live here now. And so Ma's house was my mother's house. I am also a retired school teacher. I worked in the Southampton School District for 21 years as an art teacher and also special ed. And I'm just very interested in the history of the place. And I worked with the Long Island Children's Museum over the summer with a display along with Jeremy and Tahanish, Tarrant, and also David Martin. So most people on here have seen the exhibit. It's gone now, but it was great to be a part of that. So yeah, just happy to be here, and thank you. Thank you for hosting tonight. And thank you too over there, Jeremy and Brianna. So
Thank you, Denise. I'm going to mute you so we don't have
feedback.
yeah. Okay, we should be good. Okay, and then Allison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I just realized I'm not on the Zoom, so I'm going to talk this way.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Allison McGovern. Thank you for having me again. I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time at Ma's house, so I'm really excited. And I am serving as an advisor on this project for the land acknowledgement. And I'm a professional archaeologist. So I work in the field of contract archaeology, but I also teach at Columbia University. I'm a visiting lecturer in anthropology. I'm involved in several archaeology boards like the New York Archaeological Council and Long Island's Preservation Board. But I'm really happy to be an advisor to this project. I find it really important, the project of developing land acknowledgement and developing relationships with the nations. I think it's really significant, and so I'm happy to be here.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Allison. Okay, so we're going to move through the slideshow, maybe. Let's see if I can figure it out. Okay, there we are. I was starting to really doubt my technical abilities. Okay, so I know we spoke about it the last time. So for folks that were part of the conversation the last time, some of this might sound familiar, but just so that we can have a quick overview, What is land acknowledgement? What is a land acknowledgement?
So the land acknowledgement.
I gotta get unmuted. Sorry. Sorry, I was on mute. So it's a formal statement and it can be made, at different places, different occasions, ceremonies. But really, land acknowledgement is about, respect for the people who once lived here, the people who still live here now, who are indigenous to the place. And just to let people know and educate that we've been here for at least 10,000 years. So that's thousands of generations. And our part as Indigenous people are as stewards of the land and taking care of the land, the water, the animals, the plants. And one part of it, from our perspective, that land acknowledgement goes along with is a whole different way of thinking, that we think of land and the surrounding waters, that we have to preserve it for the next 7 generations. So that's another important part of it. And the land, most people think of land as something that's bought, something that's sold, something that's rented, but to us, it's our mother that we need to help take care of, who's taken care of us and provided us with, medicinal plants through the, forever, for time immemorial. And still it's a place where Shinnecock people here can still hunt, can still gather, can still fish. So there's a lot of things right here on Shinnecock that we still do and that we've learned through different generations. So it is different polarizing views. We think of gratitude, thankfulness, and appreciation. So that is to share with others who may not have thought of that perspective. Give that background for land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We're doing the mute, unmute again. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Denise. Allison, did you want to add to that or?
So, yeah, well, the last time I had mentioned the ways that I have seen land acknowledgements be used. And so coming at the creation of a land acknowledgement as a person who's involved with institutions and research, one of the things that I like to see is that it recognizes Indigenous people as stewards of the land, and it's a statement that acknowledges the land, significance, people's connection to the land, and the long history and processes that have resulted over thousands of, tens of thousands of years that have led to our relationships today. And I have seen land acknowledgements in different formats, at conferences as a spoken statement to acknowledge people. I've seen it listed on websites. I've seen land acknowledgements used as taglines on emails, so there's various ways that I've seen a land acknowledgement been used. And I think that it's important for us to develop an appropriate way to acknowledge, especially in relation to the Children's Museum.
And that's a question that came up, and we'll dive a little deeper into it as well, about how to make land acknowledgements accessible for multi-generational, for children, for adults, in a way that a lot of people can access it and understand it. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get there. I'm going to just move us forward a little bit here. Again, maybe, there we go. So why are land acknowledgements done?
Jump in there again. So, some of the things we've already kind of covered a little bit, but it also goes down to strengthen our relationships, and past trauma that has been done, just to educate people. Things happen, whether they were colonial wars or disease happened to the Indigenous people, or forced assimilation. Children were removed from the land. That was a big thing that was done back in the 1800s, and even continued through like 1970, to take children away from their land. Once you took children away from the land and put them in residential schools, they had the separation of the land, not knowing how to live on the land, how to survive on the land. So it's really important to acknowledge the different things that have been done so that people can see who may not have ever heard of these different occurrences that happen, that they become accustomed with, this is what happened. A lot of different nations are also fighting for land rights. So that's an important ingredient as well. And just to know that there is an Indigenous presence that never ended. There's sometimes scholarly, in writings, they'll say, oh, the last of the natives moved, they were moved somewhere, west of the Mississippi River, and there are no more people around on the East Coast or in the Northeast. But that, sometimes that was true, yes, but there was always a presence of Indigenous people, not maybe all the original groups, but we're survivors and we're still here. We still, know of our sacred places. So it's just to let people know, whether it's during lectures or public events when it's done, all these different issues that still affect us today.
Yeah, I think it's a really good reminder to acknowledge people in the present, I think that land acknowledgements are done to build bridges, right, between people and sort of reconcile with our past. But having the conversations that we've been having, I think it's also really important to remind people about their own personal relationships with the land, and I think that that's something that's coming out of this project.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a reminder, and it helps create even more of an awareness, individually, for us to think about where we live, where we work, and how we're interconnected. So that's definitely, I think, been coming through this work that we've been doing. I'm going to move us kind of quickly just so that we can get to the questions that we haven't spoken about yet. And we've talked a little bit about how land acknowledgements are helpful and important in the past minute. If there's anything else that you want to share, definitely go for it. Otherwise, I'll keep us moving.
Well, since it's a children's museum, it's just so important to reach out, to the children and start making them aware, at a very young age. We all have to drink the same water. We all have to breathe the same air and, live in the same place. So it's everyone has to do their part and just be conscious of, taking care, like I said before, of Mother Earth. So that's really important. And then it also goes to, one of the things that sometimes when people are building on land, they don't realize that there may be a burial there. And so actually, New York State is one of the only 2 states in the whole United States that has no protection for any burials of Indigenous people. So anyone can just go and dig up someone's remains and dispose of them how they like. And actually, land acknowledgement is important because right now there's a bill in front of our governor, our new governor, or not really our new governor, but Governor Hochul. We're waiting to find out to be signed just to protect any land that may still have burial grounds in them, and at least to do things like a ground penetrating radar. So land acknowledgement is so much more than just saying, oh, thank you for the people who once lived here, because those same people who once lived here are susceptible to being disturbed. And that's one of the things I didn't mention earlier, that I'm part of the Nyamak Land Trust, and we work with the Conic Land Trust to see that the land is protected where they are sacred, where there are sacred areas and burial grounds as well.
Thank you, Denise.
No, I'm good on that.
Making sure. So, I think we've talked a little bit about, not directly, but a lot of what you just said, Denise, and what we've been talking about is what do we want to come out of the land acknowledgement. I know for the museum, it's important for us to have an ongoing relationship you know, and to continue to build and strengthen that relationship and use our space, which is an educational organization, that to be a place where people can learn about not only the people that came before, but the people that are still here, and how to be responsible partners in taking care of our planet and our earth and one another. So, you know, I know personally, and I believe I speak for the museum, that that is something that we want to come out of a land acknowledgement. You know, it's not an ending. It is a part of a process and a part of a beginning. So just speaking from the museum's perspective, you know, that's where we land on that question. Yeah.
I have a question. I mean, obviously it's about the acknowledgement, and I understand that it's read, statements are often read, and often I have seen plaques that knowing us, which I feel like you do know us very well, is there any ideas that you have about what the acknowledgement could look like for us? Could it be something, you know, obviously we'll have some representation saying where our land is on, but it seems like a missed opportunity to just say something and not make it a teaching tool. So have we given any thought to how that acknowledgement could look? Could it be a work of art that's attached to it occasionally? Could it be an interactive thing or a conversation starter for families? Being that our mission is to really be learners and community advocates, I feel like, have we thought about how we're acknowledging it at all?
And make it a living document.
A living and things that people will really, you know, people could walk past something on the wall, but I'm thinking like the acknowledgement and the way we do things could be a really wonderful teaching opportunity. I don't know if we've gotten that far.
Yeah, I can answer that. Can you just introduce yourself
Sure.
for folks?
Yeah, no, my name is Amy Chisholm. I'm the director of education. So of course, I'm always thinking of how are we educating people with this. And I just, you know, acknowledgement can mean so many things, you know, but I would love to see it be a teachable moment.
Yeah. So actually that's part of what I wanted to have as part of the conversation tonight, because we have begun thinking about what the next step is beyond just a statement.
Yeah.
And we are interested in having some kind of interactive educational component become part of the museum's exhibits, where kids can engage and begin, you know, building those foundational learning blocks. And so, you know, we have some ideas that we've been starting to throw around, but it shouldn't be just us.
No,
Yeah,
really
yeah.
a question for like Denise and Jeremy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have you seen different ways that it has been done?
And to piggyback on that, and what do you feel are the most important threads or ideas or concepts to, you know, have the kids engaging with at a very young age? You know, where are our beginnings? What should we be sure to include?
Oh, I know we've been discussing it and almost like having a child's land acknowledgement, so that they will understand at a very, you know, young age what that means. Because as a former educator in the Southampton School District, children, or even when I present sometimes to other schools now, they just don't even understand that their neighborhood was once, you know, a place where there were wigwams and there was villages and a place where people lived. So it's really important to, you know, I guess we have to use our creativity, you know, and then the Long Island Children's Museum and other places, just to kind of do an overlay. This is how it once looked, and this is how it looks now, and, you know, demonstrate it that way. That would be one way. But then some adults don't even realize, like I had done a presentation over in Hampton Bays at a mural that I just did. And this one, it was an elderly man, and he said, I don't understand how Native Americans were put on reservations. I don't understand that. So, I mean, education has to be put into the whole, different schools, but it's not only in schools, it's curriculum. So curriculum goes all the way up to Albany, it goes, state levels where this information needs to be put into place. And once it is put into place, I know, I mean, I've presented as far away as Australia and talking in front of some of the groups of the children who are native to the country. As soon as I came in with my regalia and I start, I'm a living history, contemporary, they're contemporary. And I talked about the similarities between our indigenous people here and with them, and we went through the same history, and just the children just perk up and like, oh, talking about us. So, it really reaches, children who that's their history. But not only that, but if you're not indigenous, it really, I think it there can be a way to make relationships much stronger, to have that understanding of, this is what it was, and this is where we're at now, and what can we do? No one, and then the whole other thing is like, no one is to blame. There is no blame. This is just what happened. And so, we're here now. So what can we do now? And there are things that can be done after a land acknowledgement. There's Neomic Land Trust, where we're trying to get land preserved, working with Peconic Land Trust in Southampton. There's the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood and Hampton Bays, and they have a lot of initiatives, and it's all kind of initiatives about taking care of the land, and whether it's the land or the water. There's the Shinnecock kelp farmers. There's so many things, and with technology that we can just branch out and then tell each other. And meanwhile, these children are learning. There's so many things that we can do, and what can they do? If they go into science and technology, how can they spread the word? To the whole idea is really to protect the land and for it to be here still for 7 generations. That's so important. So many people think of things like immediate gratification and, well, I'm just going to dig this up and I'm just going to get the sand out of here to build, some more foundations, and then not even bother to restore the land. But if we can start at a really young age, to incorporate these things and have, I mean, I was even impressed with the Children's Museum, how we had the postings of what do you think about land acknowledgement, and a lot of the people who came in like, what are you even talking about? What is that? So it's a new thing, and I just, I think it's great that the Long Island Children's Museum is taking the initiative to go that way. And there's other organizations that have done it. I see Elka is from the Watermill Center, and I know the Watermill Center, that's another creative art space in Watermill, and they have done a land acknowledgement. And then it's to be brought into a place at the table. So to be part of the conversation, to say, this is what we want, this is what needs to be done. So it's just that whole openness, and to discuss things and to show things, and the meeting of the minds, like, this is it. This is what we're doing now. This is it. This is what we want. This is just going to build, and it's just going to, what do they say? Like, a little pebble goes into the water and it has a ripple effect, and more people find out about it and say, oh, well, I can do this, or I can contribute that, or I have an idea. So it's really an amazing process. I don't know if I answered your question.
Because we have garden and space, and I'm like, oh, maybe there's some connective tissue there. And I knew where it would be maybe in other instances, but I actually wasn't thinking about outside. And now I'm thinking, oh, because you mentioned some of the projects that nature and taking care of it. I'm like, oh, that could be interesting. So yeah, she answered it.
Very good.
I don't know. Then later, but something else.
I was thinking that that the land acknowledgement could be like multi-component. That you have something for adults that could be text-based, and maybe also includes ways to be you know, an ally to the nations and, you know, an ally in as a steward to the land. And then something, because obviously we have to say it, right? Kids can't read, right? I mean, some of the kids that are coming to your museum are very little. So something more tactile, you know, and creative, that really gets them thinking, you know, outside of, you know, the written text that's available for adults, but thinking about it in a variety of different ways so that it's not just, you know, this statement and then we get over it with it and move on to other things,
Yeah,
you know.
no, right, that's what I'm saying,
Right,
and
yeah.
I'd love to see it,
Yeah.
not just acknowledgement. Feels like it could fall, you know, just
Yeah.
acknowledging something, but I would love it to be much greater than that and, you know, deepening a real understanding, you know, and we have the opportunity to do that, which I think is.
Yeah.
When I think we're so close to the Friends of the Hempstead Plains, and the land that the museum sits on, was once part of the Hempstead Plains. And so I think we can think about who we should be connecting with and partnering with and learning from, and that are around us in community organizations that are working on things like this. You know,
Do we think there could be any imagery of what the land did look like before where we are, or how do we even go about?
sorry, say that.
Would there be any imagery of what the land we sit on could did look
So
like at one
It's funny,
point?
we were just talking about
Yeah.
this earlier.
yeah, we were. I mean, I know, and Allison, you may know of other resources for it. I know that I've come across photographs, you know, I mean, we're not going to know what it looked like prior to people, you know, like European settlers coming into the area. But there are photographs from there and, you know, accounts of what it looked like when they first came to that area that, you know, and the Friends of the Hempstead Plains has written a really extensive history of both the, you know, the vegetation and the fauna and flora and, you know, so I think we could get some photographs, but we could only go back so far, obviously.
Yeah.
Could we create art that represents it based on, you know, that historical record? Or
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's any way to, you know, thinking how we're talking 5,000 years ago, like if we knew were there communities on this land, I don't know if there's a way to know that.
Right.
And what would that have looked like? And that's
Right.
do we know?
Well, you know, I think from like a scientific perspective, that, you know, there's ways that that archaeological work at like paleoethnobotany is a method for sort of like researching through pollen analysis and soil analysis about the vegetation that previously occupied the lands. And while that research might not necessarily be available for the Long Island Children's Museum, it's interesting to be able to talk about that process for understanding past landscapes.
Right.
So that, you know, that's an approach.
And actually, that's something that I read in the book that the Friends of the Hempstead Plains had just published recently, and it talked about how the change in the soil because of agriculture and cattle being brought into the area, you know, changed the soil so that it couldn't sustain certain grasses that were native to the area. And so to reclaim certain spaces, it's more complicated environmentally, you know, to be able to, there are plots that are more successful than others that where they've been able to create the soil to support it, but it goes deeper and broader than you might originally think. Right?
Yeah, and there's archaeologists that are looking at it right now, you know, like there's students that are studying this, because they're applying archaeological data or geological data to understanding climate change.
Yeah.
You know, and the only way to understand where we can go is to understand where we came from. So it's really, you know, it's a hot topic right now in research. So even if the data is not available, talking about that's one way that we can move forward, you know.
Right.
So,
I want to just, before we keep going, I want to just comment on some of the comments that are coming in, because there are some questions. So AJ said Denise's comment about blame, I think, is important. Fear of blame generates mental barriers, I think, which I think agree wholeheartedly. Ashley asked what other children's museums or museums have gone through this process. I'm going to read through them all and then we can dive in. Here, Marianne said, here in Port Washington, there were graves excavated by the sand dunes next to Bar Beach. There should be acknowledgement on that site. And then Elka said, is there some standard language that all local institutions should use that would support the work of land acknowledgement? So all very good questions and comments. Does anyone want to jump in on one of those questions? What do you think? Let's see. Standard language.
So I guess that's sort of a question to how you develop a land acknowledgement, right? Some of the methods. And so we could talk a little bit about our methodology, right? Because I don't see that there's a one size fits all approach for developing land acknowledgements. Every land acknowledgement is going to be specific to the geography, the people, you know, the relationship that you want to come out of the land acknowledgement. I mean, in our process, we're using a variety of resources to develop a land acknowledgement. We're having conversation, which is one of the most important, you know, aspects of it. But we're also doing some background research on the land in the historic period and earlier. So one of the things that we started to look at is treaties and deeds, basically land records from the colonial period of contact between European arrival and the land negotiations, for lack of a better word, with indigenous people during that time, so that we can identify a name if there is one on the document, and a tribal affiliation if there's one marked on the document. And then we can talk about historical processes from there. But I think that there's a variety, like a land acknowledgement has to be developed cooperatively. We've seen the one that the Long Island Museum developed.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because it talks about a deep history. It has a connection of people to place, you know, and then I think it also has information about paths forward. They look at it as a living document.
Right. Yeah. It's evolving for sure.
Yeah.
And I think what's nice about that one as an example, it allows you to dive as deep as you would like. It provides resources about that space. And where to keep learning if you want to know more than what they've put on their website. So I think that's,
Yeah.
you know, something to think about when we're developing ours and beyond. Sorry.
No, that's it. No. And then do you know of any other children's museums that have land acknowledgements?
There's one that I've come across in, God, now I can't remember the exact name, but they're in Washington State. And they do have, No, it was like, I'm not going to remember. It was more like a discovery, kids discovery. But they have a brief land acknowledgement on their social justice page. But that is the only one that I've been able to find. I see AJ is saying there are a handful of children's museums working on land acknowledgement statements. Not a lot, though. And actually, AJ also made a comment that I was thinking about as well, perhaps forming a consortium among organizations around the language and shared information would be useful moving forward. Each acknowledgement is distinctive, though. And I think that could be helpful, you know, throughout Long Island. You know, we should be thinking about how to join together and support one another in exploring this and building relationships and creating land acknowledgements. So, you know, that's something to explore and think about.
Denise and Jeremy, have you been contacted by have you worked with other organizations in land acknowledgement? In Long Island?
Not children's museums,
No.
but more art institutions.
Okay.
I think it, like Fire Island Residency, there's a Hampton Museum, Duck Creek, and Springs, among many others, but they always vary, like not one class fits all, as Allison said. But I think it has to be in dialogue with indigenous communities because no matter like where you live, there's always like a descendant who probably doesn't like live in the vicinity at least. They were forcibly removed, or maybe they like the sister tribe, so they can speak on behalf of them. But I think it's unique each one because I think there's an institution that has a history of and they have different relationship and they have to sort of admit it, and they come to that by interacting with the tribes and making sure that they all come to a consensus and agreement on wording. And then if it's like a small institution or a very small footprint, we can zero dollar budget. Just like that. So I always think that with land acknowledgements, there's like so many examples. And at the end of this slideshow, there's like that native land.ca website, so everyone can find their address. But I think the land acknowledgement is just like a very small portion of the mention, which is most of the work, I think.
Yeah.
So I would just take that text, plug in where you are, and work with that tribal affiliations or other regular relations.
Some of the things that have been popping into my head is just like a reminder with the land, going back in time and how, we were taken over by either the English people from Great Britain or by the Dutch on Long Island. And so a lot of records are probably in Europe from the most earliest, contacts. So I don't know, maybe we need to go there, connect. Go for a trip and see, how they describe things also. And then some of the things are in other languages, or it's in Old English. So, I know some of the work that my daughter has done, working with different other attorneys and for us to get federal recognition, for instance, a lot of work had to be done as far as, what was it like here, who was in charge of what. So that, that's another part that's important as far as, documenting the history and knowing, where things were. And then a lot of times in those treaties, what they found is, there's a lot of bias and there's a lot of racism that goes along with it, and that you have to really read between the lines in a different, way when you look at it. I have a land acknowledgement, a little practice from the Sisters of St. Joseph when I went up there to visit recently to do a talk with the Nyamak Land Trust. And there starts out with more than 500 years, Native communities across the Americas have demonstrated resilience and resistance in the face of violent efforts to separate them from their land, their culture, and each other. They remain at the forefront of movements to protect Mother Earth and the life she sustains. Those original inhabitants created a respectful relationship with the land and took their responsibility of stewarding the land to heart. A land acknowledgement reminds us all of the tribes that have been intentionally erased through genocide committed by the United States government and displacement of indigenous people. Acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way of showing respect and a step forward, correcting the stories and practices that erase indigenous people's history and culture, and towards inviting and honoring the truth. Acknowledgement is a critical public intervention, a necessary step toward honoring Native communities and enacting the much larger project of decolonization and reconciliation. So, some of those are some powerful words that the sisters have done. But they, Jeremy kind of mentioned it, like, what do you do afterwards? You just leave it as a land acknowledgement. I know that came up with a lot of the different comments. And in the case of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood, and who also have the villa in Hampton Bays, I had mentioned the Shinnecock kelp farmers. So that is a way of helping not only to employ, the 6 Shinnecock women who are the kelp farmers, the sugar kelp, but it's also, again, stewarding the water and cleaning it of the nitrogen, where, the town of Southampton has allowed buildings going on, and just all people's, fertilizer have gone into the water. And you know, it's education and letting everybody know, but this is all the water that we all want to go in, that we all want to swim in, that we all want to go boating in, that we want to sustain. So it's, you know, that's just some of the more important things of land acknowledgement that really is talking about yourself and, you know, keeping yourself safe as well as the whole community for generations to come. So it has such a huge umbrella. It's just not a little simple thing. And just that it's important to follow it up with, you know, activities. And like I said before, to bring people to the table or to, you know, speak together or to have art projects done together and, you know, to get different perspectives, whether it's anthropological or from the native people, indigenous people. So, you know, it's just a powerful coming together. And I think a lot of it is about healing. And I think in a previous talk, I said it's kind of a prayer that we're all saying together to save, you know, the earth.
Denise, I know you're an artist. It's great. And you know, when you're talking, I'm really struck by when you started talking about Mother Earth. And I think that's really interesting for us to think about because the concept of mother or somebody who cares for a child is a very early learning and recognition. Is there any depiction of like Mother Earth or how it gets depicted? Is there any art that is surrounding the concept of Mother Earth, or is it just how is it? Is there imagery or how is it referred to in?
Well, part of it actually was, you know, demonstrated at the Long Island Children's Museum with the exhibit with the turtle, and that's part of the whole creation story. And so what's said, a lot of indigenous people believe with our creation story that it started on the back of a turtle, and the woman who came down, the Sky Woman.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, for young kids, you get the concept of mother or somebody who loves you very early, and thinking that could be a really good early childhood link, and how it is got depicted and taking care of. Your mother is looking out for you, and you look out for your early child.
And then sometimes, you know, people will say Turtle Island and how, you know, with the what's now Canada and the United States and part of South America is all in the shape of a turtle. So that's been depicted to go along with Mother Earth. And then sometimes there is a woman on top, and that's actually the Shinnecock kelp farmers. They have a logo like that with the earth and the mother on top. And then they have the sugar kelp that's near the water that's trying to, you know, get the pollution out of it. So, but there's a lot of different kinds of depictions, yes.
And I think the mother is definitely something that early childhood can connect with, but I think also just that natural connection to animals and the land and the environment is a natural connection for very young kids as well. So I think there's a way to connect everything that we're talking about on multiple levels for young kids to really, you know, identify with and engage with too. We have a couple of comments I wanted to just mention. Elka mentioned, I would like to invite representatives from the Shinnecock Nation to come join us at a Hamptons Arts Network meeting to help us develop language and practices around land acknowledgement out here on the East End. And then Marianne said, isn't there an Unkachug reservation here on Long Island who may have knowledge? Donna Barron from Little Neck has written books about her ancestors in Little Neck.
Oh yeah, definitely there is a Unkachug people on the Poospatuck reservation in Mastic. And I work together with Chief Harry Wallace there, and he is a part of our Braves Protection Warrior Society. And so, yeah, we've worked with him. He's got a lot of knowledge there. Some of our work that we've done with the Peconic Land Trust out here on the East End involves securing land that will never be disturbed again. And a lot of our ancestors' bones have ended up in all different kinds of colleges and in museums, sometimes dentists, you know, office from way back when. So we are getting the repatriation of all of those ancestors, and then trying to find places that are as close to where they were taken to put them back so that they can continue to rest in peace. So anyway, yeah, Chief Harry Wallace there has worked extensively with that. You know, one of the things that he says when we do our ceremonies with him, that there is no song about, you know, putting someone back into the earth who was never supposed to ever come out of the earth in the first place. So we have, he has done extensive research and also teaching at Stony Brook with the language, the Algonquin language. So they've had to make songs, new songs, where we apologize and we're sorry that you were taken. So yeah, that's, you know, some of our private ceremonies that we have and songs. So yeah, there's quite a number of things, not only with the Unkachog people, but also with the Shinnecock people, with Tecumseh Caesar, who also comes with us and does the ceremonies, because sometimes the bones and the artifacts are not Shinnecock. They may come from Unkachog, they might come from the Shinnecock, and only because Shinnecock had gotten federal recognition only 10 years ago, we're in the position to approach different places that get federal funding to get our ancestors back. And because Matinecox, they don't really have a, you know, a land base that's, you know, says primarily reservation, even though there are people who are still in those areas. And the Unkachog are recognized by the state of New York, but have not gotten their federal recognition, which takes, you know, an enormous amount of money to do, and time has to go into that. But we've worked together to help them secure their ancestral remains as well.
So I'm just noting what time it is. We only have a few minutes left. So I'd invite anyone that has any questions or comments that they'd like to share. I'm going to just go through this to make sure we've touched on everything we wanted to. And I do know a number of the questions asked about the history of the land the museum is on. And we've done a lot of research, and there's more research to be done. But I think when we create our land acknowledgement, we will be thinking about how to share the history of the land the museum sits on, so that it can become common knowledge and easily accessible to our visitors. And so that's something that we're to be continued on that.
Is it something that obviously we would show to you, and you'd read, and there'd be discussion around who writes it? That's my real question. Is it? Do we write it? Or
My understanding is we write it, and you know, but we use the guidance of Denise and Allison and anybody else that is willing to give us guidance and read it and make sure that we are, you know, representing the history of the people in the land where the museum sits appropriately and respectfully. And you know, so I think it's done in concert with a lot of voices, but it'll probably be me typing with help, obviously. But yeah.
And we've been working on this for quite.
It's been a couple of years now.
Quite a long time.
It has been.
Tonight or last week.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been a long process, and you know, it's not over for sure, but we've been building a lot over the past few years. So, and I just wanted to see the comments. Marianne said, I have had experience as an art teacher introducing Indigenous history with an arrowhead from my childhood backyard in Manhasset. Students were very interested. We made wigwams, realistic clothing, and learned about wampum. And then AJ said it's the museum's work to do, so it's appropriate for groundwork to be done by staff first. Collaborating with Denise and Allison is a very valuable part of the process.
That's what I thought, I just didn't know, I mean, I'm assuming you get a final seal, like, we are pleased with that, it's here. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sharing it without that. So some of the questions that we got were about how to advocate for similar efforts elsewhere on the island. So that's something we can dig into a little bit.
Well, I mean, my thought on that is when we get to whatever we have and how we share it is sort of in advocating, it's how we share it and what public programs we develop around it and, you know, doing that work that goes along with it. Then if we can share that with others, that, you know, is that an appropriate way to advocate for it? And sharing what we've learned and what we've done.
Definitely, I think, whoops, I didn't unmute myself.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, you know, very valuable. Share, you know, what you know, and then just have resources. Do you want to know more about it? You know, do you want to come to places like Ma's house? Do you want to be on site? So, you know, this is a really good venue. There's other, you know, places to attach. And thank goodness we have technology for people to, you know, find out more. Because, you know, sometimes when I'm just going through books, you know, about, you know, Shinnecock, it's just like, there's nothing. It's like, oh, they had their place on Long Island, and well, the Uncle Charles, yeah, they still have, you know, we call remnants, like carpet remnants, you know, in a lot of the literature. So really, this is a big step just to have the conversation, to acknowledge that we're still here is, you know, it's huge for us. And so the more information that goes out is the better. That has not always been the case among Shinnecock people. Some of the generation before, the idea was don't say anything, pretend that you're not here. You know, if you don't say anything, people will leave you alone. But that's because that, you know, that generation experienced so many, you know, difficulties, and we're not, you know, acknowledged, and we're not, you know, respected. But here on Shinnecock in particular, where we are is a peninsula. So part of our protection has been the water. And so it's just good now. And this is just the right time to be able to feel strong enough to, you know, say what the story is. And then for you to share it is very valuable. It's very helpful. And that's how we develop more allies in the things that we're trying to, you know, do.
In terms of the bill that's in New York State, is there people that we can write to, or Maureen, just can you
Come closer, so
getting comments from folks that are talking to the table?
Sure, I'm just asking in terms of the New York State bill, if there are people that we could write, if there are people who are more influential in moving something forward. That's something I think our audience might be interested in.
Yes, you can actually contact the governor, local, and just, you know, you can even write a letter. I think that somewhere there's like social media that has a petition going on, so we can share that with everyone as well. Or you could just write your own, you know, letter and say, you know, we would like to have you sign those bills. There's 2 bills, I believe they say just about the same thing. And they're all about protecting grave sites that are on private land. If it's federal land, that's one thing, they are protected, and there's certain things that have to be done to protect them and, you know, stop all construction work. But I don't know why New York State is so far behind it. One state that's what I've heard is excellent is Florida, has excellent laws to protect these indigenous grave sites. But it's not only indigenous, it's also colonial grave sites that are unmarked. It's also African-American grave sites that are unmarked. So it's like, it's all of us really, you know, that we're trying to seek to protect. I mean, in our village in Southampton, we have a colonial grave site. And if a neighbor, you know, moves their fence over few inches, they're like, you have to take that fence out, this is protected, and we just want that same opportunity.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you can do it, but you can certainly have grown-ups. I know that sent letters sent from kids mean an awful lot to politicians. If they suddenly get 50 postcards in the mail, they react.
Yes,
So
yes.
we can explain to kids why it's important.
Right. I know, Jeremy, you had done a little postcard project, right? I think it was about our monuments and that how we have the right to put things, on our land to have economic development. And so there was a whole, we had a whole night here at Ma's house where everybody did little drawings, with the monuments and then sent them off to, I think it was like the assistant governor or whatever, I'm not sure, Letitia. The attorney general, the attorney general. So she got a bunch of postcards that were handmade. That was probably a year or two ago, I think. But yeah, all these things are so important. And to just develop more allies, more people who speak up for us. Like I remember years ago, that's when Jeremy was a baby. My daughter was young and we were trying to get a playground on Shinnecock, and I had written to one of our government officials, I think it was Senator LaValle, and they had gotten the information and they said, oh, well, thank you for, this, and perhaps if we get a grant, one day. I didn't hear from Senator LaValle for a long time, but one of our people from Shinnecock worked for the Girl Scouts of America and told them about the story. The Girl Scouts of America sends a letter of support, and all of a sudden, Senator LaValle said, oh, there is some money for a playground. The Girl Scouts of America got in touch with us and they're supporting you. So that's what you need. You need visibility. You need help with your voice sometimes. It's not heard, and especially the Indigenous population out here, a lot of times throughout history, our voices have not been heard. So yeah, getting that talk out is incredibly healthy and shows a lot of respect. So that's a good thing.
I think when we were talking about everything that we're talking about tonight, and when we were talking about with kids and what young kids understand, I think that concept of it, not us and them, but we working together to help one another and help in the world that we live in is such an integral part of what we need to be, building with kids through this work at the museum, because if there was more we, then so much of this wouldn't have happened, or we could be moving towards a more unified and stronger future. So I mean, I think a lot of the work that we've done over the past few years together and with the community here, and I think if we get nothing else but that messaging across to the kids that visit the museum, I think we've made huge strides. Like if that becomes a foundational building block for them, that it's part of them from a young age, then there's so much strength in that moving forward as they grow.
Yeah, I think another thing, when I was teaching in the school district, during Native American History Month in November, that's when everybody would, be very interested as far as the curriculum went and connecting back to the New York State curriculum in 4th grade. But one thing I would try to tell the children is just imagine if, you're in your neighborhood, you go into your school, and one day these aliens come in from somewhere, and all of a sudden, okay, you can't wear what you want to wear, you can't speak English anymore, you have to move somewhere else that's out of the way, because, I try to get them to understand things with that way, like just like a monster comes in and just, changes your whole life around. You can't eat what you once ate, and you can't speak. You might have to live with someone else or live in a building somewhere that you don't know anything about it. You can't if you bring something from home, they're going to take it away from you and put you in a uniform somewhere. So, and that's what it was like, you know, for the indigenous people. That's what it was like for the children here. Even my own mother-in-law, my husband's mom, was taken from Shinnecock, and she had to live, there was a place in Yaphank. And she said, why do I have to go to Yaphank? And they said, because she was always very thinly built, but she was a really great athlete. They were like champions of the field hockey team. And she said, but I'm not sick. I don't have anything wrong with me. And they're like, oh yeah, well, you're so thin. You need to leave your house and go live in Yaphank. And she had to live there for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years away from her mom and dad. And, you know, you think, oh, Yaphank's not that far, but it's far when you don't really have a car to go there. You know, you don't have the money to go back and forth. And that was just another separate them from their culture, from their mother. So take them away from their mother and their father. And I'm like, sometimes I would tell the kids, can you imagine someone coming in and like removing you from your house, and like maybe you can see them Christmas, maybe you can see them in the spring, or maybe you can come back in the summer, but it's not promised. And that just develops, you know, that idea of, you know, putting themselves in someone else's shoes and understanding, you know, and showing compassion and humility, and, you know, all of those things can be developed in that type of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a gut-wrenching, you know, way. I think it's a strong way for kids to understand it, for sure. On that note, no, I would like to thank you, Denise and Allison and Jeremy and Brianna, you know, for having us here and engaging in the conversation with us and doing all the work that you've been doing with us over the past few years. I think it's transformative for the museum and for all of us individually. So, you know, thank you. And we appreciate you and all of your time and effort that you've been expending to us and to what you do to your community and with your community. So thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us. I know we went over a little bit, but it's worth it, I think.
And this is Jeremy's interactive world map.
Yes, so on the screen, well, we have 2 resources on the screen. One is Jeremy's On This Site, which is an interactive map. Jeremy, if you want to just explain it quickly, but if you can do that next to Denise so people can hear you.
Do you want to share it, show?
Yep.
Slide. But hello everyone, I'm Jeremy Dennis. I'm doing a project called On This Site, and it started in 2016, and it spans Brooklyn to Montauk, all the site-specific native sites, using landscape photography and a bunch of research and reference material. So that's free to access, and it's a good starting point to maybe do your own institution land acknowledgement. There's just so much information, and it's just scratching the surface. And then there's the other site above it, which inspired mine, nativeland.ca, which is a little bit of like all the Americas. So you can go much broader beyond New York State to do a similar way of learning about language, treaties, and land acknowledgements.
Thank you, Jeremy. And really the On the Site website is such a wealth of information. I mean, it's really incredible. So I encourage everybody to visit it and explore. I mean, you could spend days exploring what you have on that website. So, and also check out Ma's house too. It's a really amazing and exciting art space that you have here, and a residency. So, you know, a plug for you for that too. Okay, thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody here. Okay, and then we'll be sharing more as we move along in the process. So, okay. Good night, everyone.
Nice. Good night. What about the comment?
Yes.
We want to take a picture.
Yeah, I don't know if did I end this? I don't think I did. I probably still. Did I? I don't know what I did just now.
I'm gonna close the slideshow and then I think we have to leave the Zoom open so
Yeah.
it saves it. So I'll just let that sit for a while and probably upload.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a live audience.
Yeah. It really is. It's nice doing it in person. I mean,
Yeah.
well, and I think it helps like actual conversation, you know, Zoom is so difficult.
Jeremy's getting better.
Oh,
Yeah.
you need to be in it, Jeremy.
Anyway.
Brianna.
Okay, are we all ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna do one more. Take this time. Yeah, talk about it. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Jeremy, let me get one with you in it as well.
Okay.
Let's fight it.
All right.
Right here. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
We'll shut the laptop.
Right here. Thank you for all the tech help.
I know. I think that one of the